we're already halfway through the first quarter of 2026. I don't know where the time goes, but let's talk about how the goals are going. So it's Wednesday right now. It's like the middle of the seventh week of the first quarter. I'm not where I thought I would be, but I'm not that far behind, I think. Things are going pretty well, even though, according to my Kanban, not as many things have been achieved as I had thought and wanted to have achieved by now. A big part of that, though, is that at the end of January, my entire family got sick with the flu. That also played into the timeline for Project Goblin. That's all the pink stuff on my Kanban board. That's my main project right now. It's my rom-com adventure sci-fi flavored fantasy romance novel. I had finished a really detailed zero draft of it at the beginning of January, and I had planned initially to just take a couple of weeks break from it and then come back and do a really fast draft version of a first draft of it. And when I went back to read it over, I realized that I love it. But there were some issues that I needed to fix before I actually did the first draft. Some redundancies in things that happened more times than they should. A few plot lines that I had thought I was going to pursue, and I just needed to take them out because they just didn't make any sense anymore. So there's just a couple things like that. And I thought I could do it in like a couple of days, but it happened like right when we got the flu. So instead it took like 3 weeks. But I did finish all of the changes I wanted to do. I'm feeling really good about where that's at. I finished that last Thursday, so it was just about 6 days ago. So I've stopped working on that. I'm going to give it another week or two of a break to get really psyched up again to do that like fast drafting. And I'm really excited about that. But I do need a little bit more of a break. So I've been switching over to the purple stuff, which is Project Demon. Project Goblin is the first book in an interconnected series that I'm doing, and Project Demon is the second book. So because of the way that I have found that I really like to do multiple versions of very detailed outlines for projects before actually writing them, which I'll link some videos where I talk more about that. We don't need to get into it here. But I had done the first draft of an outline for Project Demon. So this past week, I've been looking that over and doing a lot more brainstorming and thinking about how I want certain components in the story to be and what needs to change, what I still want to keep. So I've just been working on that, which has been going really well. I just today finished the component work and the sort of like backdrop structural decisions that I'm feeling good about at the moment, and that may change in the next iteration, but I'm feeling good about it at the moment. And I started looking over what I had put for what happens in each chapter. I started the process of taking out the pieces that I no longer want to use and then adding in what I do want decisions like changes I've made. So I just added in a prologue that's going to be really fun. And actually let's switch angles so I can catch you up on this because this is really fun. So what's the difference between a first draft of an outline and a second draft of an outline? For me, this is the first draft of the outline. So I like to work in 8 sequences, which I'll link in the description more about what that means. And I'm working on the moment on a script for a video to detail what that means for me. So that'll be coming out soon. But basically just like a brief summary of what all is the action, what's going on in each of those 8 sequences. And that's really more focused on the internality a lot more than like, here's this plot event that happens. And then my chapter outline, whose chapter it is, the point of view, because I do dual point of view chapters, and then a brief description of what I think the action of the scene is. So it's very brief. There's very little detail, and it's very easy to just be like, okay, actually delete this because I'm not going to use it. But I have every chapter filled out for what I think would be like the main action, main change going on in them. And For this first draft, I had left a lot of the setting and action absent from kind of like the entire second quarter because I knew what I wanted them to be doing on a large scale, but I didn't know like what that setting was or any of the actual things that were going to be happening as they were pursuing this like plot goal. And it's good that I didn't fill that in because I had one idea of where that setting was going to be for a large section of the book that I've completely abandoned. And it's going to be this entirely new, different setting with entirely new, different things they're doing in order to achieve that goal they're going for. So it makes it very easy to just be like, okay, they're no longer at this location while this little thing is happening. It's totally different. So that's the first draft. There was a lot of other things that went on behind the scenes of what that meant. Like, I really liked John Truby's Anatomy of Story. And so I like to fill out a lot of his ideas of stuff to know about a story. But I didn't have everything figured out. I kind of was going off of the initial idea that I had and then just kind of digging into that and whatever I knew from those story components that John Truby has, I was filling that in, but I wasn't trying to like get everything figured out in this first draft. And one of the things that I realized that I want to do about this story that has been a big change from the first draft is that I really want to have strong Greek myth vibes going on. So I've been reading a lot of Greek mythology. I really like the books by Stephen Fry. I read his version of Troy, and also I'm in the middle of reading his version of Heroes. And that's really, really fun. And there are some particular things that are very common in Greek myth that I want to sort of bring in a little bit to kind of like set the scene of what Project Demon's vibes are. You can just imagine a world where there are no humans, but there are demons and angels. And it's largely based on Greek mythology, like ancient Greece. So there are varying levels of power within these like demons and angels. And at a baseline, they're all essentially immortal, you know, around 500 years normal lifespan. And they have other specific things that make them not human. But angels and demons that are at these higher levels and have these specific powers, it's kind of like the angels occupy the role that the Greek gods did in ancient Greece, where the demons occupy the role that the Titans did in ancient Greece. So you have this Titans versus Greek gods kind of thing going on. And I really loved that idea. That was completely absent from the first draft of this story. And with this series, it's following a group of 5 close friends who are part of a research crew in this spacefaring sort of world where there are, you know, flying sailing ships that go through space and all this fun fantasy sci-fi flavored stuff. So we meet this protagonist in the first book because she's one of the friends. And so now she gets her own book, but what we had learned from that first book is that she is disembodied. She's she's essentially like an astral projection. So you could think of it like a ghost. Like she is incorporeal, and there's a lot of mystery about why that is, because she has long-term amnesia because of what she is, which is she's an oracle. If that sounds at all familiar, one of the big influences of this series that I want to do is Presley Cole's Immortals After Dark, where Presley Cole has this very pivotal recurring character of, does she call them an oracle? I don't know if she does. Something like that, where there's this Valkyrie who can see the future and she's kind of a little bit batty because of it. And she confuses past and future and all this stuff. And I thought that's super, super fun. I didn't want to actually do that. I do want to do like my own thing, even though I do love all these things about Presley Cole's books. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun if the price of these, you know, visions of the future is that they can only hang on to a certain amount of the present before their brain just like needs to drop everything. So she's got this long-term amnesia. She can only remember the last like 6 months or so of her life at any point. And there are reasons why she had at one point in her life decided to destroy any historical evidence she had left herself of what her life had been like. So she does not remember much before having joined this research crew that she's been with for the past while. So there's a lot of mystery in her background that we learn through the course of this book. One of those things being that she has this fated mate mark that's lit up on her shoulder. That's like part of this world, is there are fated mates, and you know that you've met your fated mate when your like fated mate mark lights up on your shoulder. And so she's known that she at some point must have met her fated mate, and she has no idea what happened or where she came from, who she was, any of this stuff. So that's kind of like the background. That was what I had initially loved about the idea to begin with anyways. And so that's all still the same, but the answers of who she was and where she came from and what happened have changed in the second draft. So let me give you the log line that I hit on for this second draft, and then I'll show you like what I'm working on that's different in the second draft right now. A timid, disembodied oracle agrees to a brooding demon's pact to embody her in exchange for becoming his eternitate, unaware that he's the fated mate she can't remember running from 200 years ago. And in this, an eternitate is a demon thing that has to do with the possession of someone's soul. And there's going to be some lying going on about what it is in the book that will be part of this conflict. I thought that was super fun because one of the things that I really want to explore in this book is how deeply integrated your memory is in who you, your self-perception, who you see yourself as. So because she can't remember any of these like pivotal life-altering moments of her life that have crafted her into the person that she is today, she can't remember any of those. She has a very poor sense of self that kind of manifests in these ways that make it very difficult for her to feel like she is worthy of love. But I wanted that to be masqueraded as someone who is just like a very sunshine, peppy person who is just like looking for the joy in life and trying to be like this ray of sunshine for everyone else while dealing internally with this fear of being unworthy because they don't know who they are, and so who knows what they've done. So she's inclined to be selfless because she's afraid of that she doesn't deserve whatever it is that she wants in life. Whereas her counterpart is this callous, tyrannical, selfish, ruthless demon king who has to learn how to be selfless and care about someone more than himself. And so his whole arc has to do with learning how to be gentle and kind and compassionate. And meanwhile, he's trying to teach her how to take what she wants, that she is very deserving. This is like a he falls first and hard kind of thing. And it's a second chance romance because he obviously remembers how they met and all the things that happened. So he's caught in this position where he has to hide that truth from her at all costs, because if she ever learns what happened, she will not want anything to do with him. And I have like a semi log line for like his point of view, because I thought it'd be fun to have one for each of their point of views. So that's when a callous, ruthless demon king is summoned by his sweet, angelic, fated mate after 200 years, believing she had died. He must decide how far he's willing to deceive her in order to win back her heart, because she has no memory of who he is or the past that made her flee from him all those years ago. So, I don't know, it's very fun, and I'm loving the Greek myth vibes of it all. That's just been such a joy to work with. So, okay, so I've gushed enough about that. This is an update video, but like, let's chill out a little bit. So what's different in the second draft of the outline? This is an outline. So all those components that I had talked about, I did spend time digging into what I thought would work well for all of those components, as well as all of the romancing the beats of which I actually embellish and add to those beats. So I looked at all of those. I had broken down the second chance trope into the beats that I would expect to find when reading a second chance trope book, and I filled out what I think the answers to those things are for them. And I also, this is the other thing worth talking about. How do I even get into this? I'm doing an experiment. I'm doing an experiment with this first series that I want to release as a self-published author. So this first series is 5 books, and I'm doing an experiment where I'm being very conscious about there are certain elements that link all 5 of the books together, that tie them together and make them feel like they are part of the same series. But there are also things that individuate each book quite a bit from each other, because I want to see, once all of them are out and there's been some time for people to find them, read them, review them, I want to see what are people most drawn to so that I can kind of do more of that. So, for instance, in the first book, I wanted to keep it very true to the inspiration, the initial inspiration of Cressley Cole's Immortals After Dark. They're very much more action-focused romances. And there is usually, I think in every single one, a big bad guy that at the end they need to defeat in order to achieve the plot goal, whatever, be together. That's a very classic format, and that is what's going on in the first book of the series. For the second book, I did not want to do a big bad guy they have to defeat. It didn't make sense with the initial things that I loved about the idea. And so I needed to find a different paradigm for how this book would play out. And so what I decided on is that what fits best is using the myth genre plot shape, which is not particularly well known, I believe. There is a video that I want to make about it, but let me grab the book. This is Anatomy of Genre, John Traby again. In this book, he has 12 genres that he defines every piece of media basically as fitting into in some way or other, and there's often a lot of overlap that one piece of media is multiple of these genres. It's a very interesting read. When I was writing the first book, he has an action genre in here, and I took a lot of inspiration from what he defines as how to build the action genre and what that shape of the story usually looks like. And that worked really well. It fit in very well with pursuing that inspiration of like being similar to Cressley Cole's Immortals After Dark. And just to read a couple little pieces of the action genre so you can see how different the myth genre is. Action says we grow by doing, by taking action. So in action, becoming equals doing. Fighting is the most primal action there is, and action is all about fighting all the way to success. The main distinction of the action form is that life is about doing well, not doing good. It's about being successful, not morally right. The form's overall story strategy is to set up an intense punch-counter-punch routine between hero and opponent in a heavyweight fight. The fact that the action hero is a fighter who uses force to succeed also determines the story world. It's always a community or nation in trouble and usually in physical danger. This is important because it justifies why an expert fighter is needed and why that fighter must use force. So that's how the first book is set up. That's how the universe is set up, that you have to use force in this universe because of the way that I'm creating it, because I want that. There is one major similarity between myth and action stories, the way that he defines it, which is that myth and action both approach the idea of freedom. But in action says that freedom is possible only when the individual fights against those who seek to enslave, like a big bad guy. And myth says that freedom is realized only when the individual grows enough to be able to free themselves. So the second book is modeled after myth. In myth, life is a journey in which one's ultimate goal is to understand oneself. And we see this in the form's overall story strategy, which is the hero encounters a number of opponents on a journey that eventually exposes their deeper self. That is the self-revelation leading to character change. The physical journey typically ends with the hero returning home. The life journey ends with the hero's inner rebirth. So it's a very different kind of climax or end of the story. The basic role of the hero in myth is not the fighter, like action is, but the searcher. And what each hero searches for is quite different. In myth, a hero like Jason may search for the Golden Fleece. Odysseus searches for home. In the process of that search, they find the meaning in their own life. So the protagonist in the second book is searching for how to become embodied again. But what they're actually literally searching for is, who are they? What happened in their life? And they're afraid of the answers, and that creates a lot of inner conflict. But by becoming embodied, they are on this path to discover who they were, what happened, and come to an understanding of who they are now. So it's a completely different paradigm. There is no big bad guy that they're going to be fighting. It's this inner conflict, and they're going to be bouncing off of each other as each other's main primary opponents that are challenging each other to overcome their internal weaknesses. That's what I'm working on right now. I went through the beats that he gives for how to create a myth story, the typical story beats there are for myth, and I filled those out. And doing all of those, I love beats. Like, all of these components and beats that I filled out really helped flesh out what had been the little pieces of hey, this could be an interesting story, undeveloped kind of idea, into, okay, I really like these things, and here are some options. And there are a couple places where I left like 3 or 4 different options because I don't know exactly which one I want to use yet. And I figure probably by the time I come around to do a third draft of this outline, I'll have a better idea of which one of those I want to choose. So we're kind of chipping away from the initial idea to the heart of what I'm getting really excited about. And it's fun doing all this stuff. And it's interesting because one of the initial things that had drawn me to this idea was an idea of a certain backstory between the two of them that I thought was really cute, really fun, really compelling. There were just a couple very major problems with how and why that background would have set up the problems that I wanted to be dealing with in the actual story. And at the time, I was like, I'll probably like figure it out. And what I figured out is that while that's a really fun backstory, there's actually a different backstory that's kind of equally as fun that doesn't have the problems, actually sets up what I want, and reinforces the internal conflict I want going on with these characters. So I am abandoning one of the things that I had initially really loved about this idea in favor of this new fun idea for how to tie it all together. So this is what the second draft version looks like. There's a lot more written in for the actual scene, and then there's also a bunch of notes to keep in mind as I'm looking at the next draft of this or drafting it. So I have the first 6 chapters, the prologue and the first 6 chapters, and then I took the text from the scenes and put it into this paragraph outline so that I can just read what I have, sort of like a zero draft. That's what I did with Project Goblin, only it was in a more intensive beat by beat through the scene version. But I really like this, just being able to read kind of the core meat of what's going on. With the progress that I've been making, I feel like it's likely that I will finish this second draft in the next couple days or possibly early next week. So that'll be really fun. And then I'll just switch over and see if I'm excited enough to start doing the first draft of Project Goblin, or if I need to take a look at doing the first draft outline of my third book in the series. So we'll find out. That's the update. In other life news, we're getting our first couch we've ever bought in our lives delivered tomorrow. So I need to clean the living room so they can deliver that. And otherwise, things are going well. We're going to start sewing onions soon, hopefully on Valentine's Day. I hope that your January has been great and life continues to be great and writing is great. And I'll see you in the next video.